so this is part 1 to a new What If based off of X-Men. I think this was one of my first What Ifs I based off of X-Men other than What If Deku was Quicksilver. Now, basically guys, this is What If Deku was Darwin. Now, no other What Ifer has done this, at least I think so. Now, if you don't know who Darwin is, he's pretty of a obscure X-Men character. If you're in the X-Men, I didn't even know Darwin existed, and I was pretty into X-Men for about, 10 to 3 months until I got back into, Marvel after Marvel, introduced WandaVision. But basically, Darwin, if you don't know who Darwin is, let me give you a little backdrop. Darwin is basically a mutant in the X-Men franchise. He was in X-Men First Class. His power is to basically adapt. In Marvel terms, he can basically adapt. It's a more, scientific and more accurate word in the Wikipedia books, but you can just look that up. Basically, he can adapt to anything, but his powers are, his powers are offense, not defense. Like, one time in the comics, he was trying to fight the Hulk, and he thought since his power is to adapt and to survive, his power is to adapt to survive, he would, get as strong as the Hulk or as durable as the Hulk so he can survive Hulk's blows. But instead of giving him, that, he gave him teleportation because, the most tactical way to beat the Hulk is to not fight the Hulk, just teleport away. Like, what you trying to do fighting the Hulk? So pretty much, it's some hilarious things. Like, one time, he got a mutant, he got like a virus in the comic books that would attack the nervous system. So basically, instead of his, his power, taking away the virus or making him immune to the virus, it made him into a living sponge man because sponge people don't have nervous systems. What? That has to be so sucky to be a sponge person. Darwin, it was also some cool things like Darwin turned intangible when he was going through lasers, and also how his skin just turned fireproof when he was walking into a fire, a building on fire, or how his, skin turned bulletproof when he got shot. Or, how Darwin regenerated a whole entire new limb because his body used, mutated cells or made mutated cells of a, lizard tail so he can regenerate his arm. Pretty much stuff like that. So Darwin is a pretty good, is a pretty OP character nonetheless. Like one time Hela used her death touch on Darwin, and Darwin literally turned into a death god to, well, survive that attack. He literally turned into a freaking god to pretty much survive. Like, how OP do you have to be to turn into a god just to survive? Like, literally, Darwin's power is pretty overpowered. And I don't know why they nerfed him so much in, X-Men First Class, because he got killed off in a span of a couple minutes. Like, how? Like, he did, like, when the team got banded together, he barely had any screen time. He got killed off incredibly fast. Like, what? I would love to see more of Darwin in the future. But why did they kill him off so fast? Like, come on. Because the writers or the CGI, like, the movie could have had a lot of fun with Darwin's, abilities. But, like, really? Just killed him off like that. And the only black guy in X-Men Evolutions, or I mean X-Men First Class, you just killed him off. Like, what? But yeah, so basically, let's get into What If. Sorry, guys, I just wanted to explain Darwin's powers. It's pretty simple. He has every power, but he has to adapt to get the power. So yeah, basically, Deku is born with this power as a quirk. Now, basically, Deku is going to look a little bit different. I'm going to change Deku's, looks. Now, Deku's going to not be bald. Deku's just going to have black hair. Deku's also going to have, you know, blanked out silver-ish, brownish eyes like in this picture. And Deku's also going to have, the same skin tone as this. But Deku's not going to have lanky proportions like, in this picture. Deku's going to have the same proportions and the same body that he had during the 10-month arc training naturally. And Deku's also going to have, black hair, brownish, silverish eyes that have no pupils, just the whole entire eyeball is just that color. And Deku also has, you know, that skin complexion in this picture that Darwin has. So basically, Deku, still has freckles. His freckles are just a lot more darker shades, so it can be differentiated from his skin tone. So basically, Deku doesn't develop his quirk until he gets about 5 years old, the normal age to get your quirk, you know, activated. Now Deku, being Deku, pretty much goes to school and pretty much waiting for his quirk to kick in. Pretty much Bakugo gets his quirk about 2 weeks. About 2 days before Deku gets his quirk. So pretty much Bakugo's waving his quirk in people's faces, pretty much bragging about his quirk is the strongest, and pretty much everybody's saying that as well. But pretty much Deku, is excited for his quirk. They go into the forest and pretty much instead of Deku, Deku actually falls into the river instead of Bakugo, and the river in this universe is actually going to be a lot more deeper, and Deku in this universe can't swim. Deku falls into the water, and he starts to, drown. Deku's foot gets cut, gets, pretty much stuck under some sticks, and pretty much he starts drowning, not being able to breathe or swim or kick the log off his leg because he's freaking 5 years old or like 10 or something. So pretty much Deku can't free himself. Deku's panicking, and pretty much Bakugo and his friends try to grab a pro hero. They get a pro hero, but they get a pro hero, but in the meantime, Deku, is struggling, trying to move, but eventually Deku's quirk kicks in and adapts himself. Deku adapts to his environments and pretty much turns into a mermaid or merman type of creature. Deku's confused and pretty much looks at himself, seeing that he has flaps between his fingers like this and pointy claws. Deku also has gills, and Deku also has flippers on his feet. Deku is confused, but also he can breathe normally underwater. Deku has increased strength and pretty much kicks the twig off, kicks the log off of his foot. But he is still a little bit weak because he ain't superhuman, but he was just as strong as an average physical fit man. So he was able to kick the tree off of him under the water. So pretty much Deku flies out of the water doing a whole entire dolphin dive or the deep dive. If you don't know the boys, you don't know that reference. Pretty much he swims out of the water, jumps on top of the log that he fell off in the first place, and runs down the log. The pro hero shows up and he sees Deku with gills. Bakugo's confused, and pretty much Bakugo says, "You have a fish quirk, Deku?" Deku says, "I don't know." And pretty much they go to the quirk doctor after the pro hero gets the police, and they call Deku's mom. Deku's mom takes Deku to the quirk doctor, and pretty much Deku's quirk is a pretty interesting and very powerful quirk. The doctor says, he says your son's power is very strong, and you become a very good hero one day. But it depends on how he trains. Pretty much, Inko is confused and pretty much says, "What do you mean?" The doctor says your son's quirk is completely different from well, from your quirk and your husband's quirk. His quirk is called pretty much survive or adaptation. So pretty much, in theory, he has proved this theory. He can adapt himself into any pretty much thing to survive any type of situation. Like how he was almost drowning, he turned into a aquatic submarine humanoid, kind of like somebody with a fish quirk. So pretty much Inko was, kind of happy for Deku because he could become a great hero with his quirk, but also a great, person in general. But it depends on what Deku, pretty much adapts to. Because pretty much the doctor says that he can adapt into something stupid, but it will still keep him alive. So, say for instance, he turns into like a brick if he's, getting stabbed or something like that. Pretty much Deku, is pretty excited that he has a very strong quirk like this and he can adapt to anything. Basically, he can survive anything. Now, with one of these powers, I'm pretty sure Darwin is immortal. I think so. I think Darwin's immortal. So yeah. So basically, Deku, you know, pretty much goes through life training and pretty much becoming pretty good friends with Deku. Bakugo. Bakugo, gets told about Deku's quirk, because Bakugo was there, the quirk doctor, in the waiting room. And pretty much Bakugo was told by Deku about his quirk, that he had the power to survive, or change to survive. Pretty much explained to his quirk to Bakugo. Bakugo was pretty, pretty much, really, really, well, impressed with his quirk. Because it sounded like a really strong quirk. And when he had one downfall, Deku didn't know what he, well, adapted to, or he couldn't, control what he adapted to. Kind of like exactly like how Darwin's powers work. So pretty much, Deku doesn't know one thing. If he does go into water, he is automatically going to transform into, aquatic, you know, fish person if he's drowning. Because that's one of the ways, the most, you know, pretty much obvious ways to survive underwater if you had a quirk like that. So pretty much Deku goes to, we do a time skip when Deku's about 16 in class. Pretty much Deku just keeps quiet in class, and pretty much we skip to the end of the class, because the class doesn't really change anything. Bakugo still brags about himself, but he says that Deku and him are going to go to UA, and the rest of his chums are going to stay here. Pretty much, getting ready. So after that whole entire incident, Deku and Bakugo start walking back home, going through the sludge villain tunnel. They go through the sludge villain tunnel, and pretty much Deku is confused because he sees a piece of sludge or some sort of thing moving out of the puddle or like water, pipe in the tunnel. And I know where the sludge villain comes out and pretty much grabs Deku. And Deku starts getting, manhandled and pretty much smothered by the sludge villain. But Deku, in a span of, being, trying to adapt, Deku, adapts into. Deku phases his body and becomes intangible, phasing through, phasing through the sludge villain. The sludge villain's confused, pretty much trying to grab Deku, but he just goes right through. The sludge villain tries to grab Bakugo, but Deku, grabs Bakugo and starts running off. Tearing off his, what was it? Adaptation, or, survival thing, or transformation, whatever it's called. Pretty much Deku runs off with Bakugo, almost getting out of the sludge villain tunnel, until All Might shows up and, takes the sludge villain before the sludge villain can catch up with Deku and Bakugo. All Might takes up the sludge villain and pretty much beats him up. The sludge villain gets beaten up and taken down, and All Might, pretty much locks him up and, puts him in his bottle, puts it in the bottles. Deku, is confused and pretty much says, "Hey Deku, I hate All Might," and pretty much says, "Can you autograph this?" All Might autographed Deku's journal, and Deku's journal is basically just a pretty much, a evolution chart of, all the adaptations that he's went through over the time gap, over the years that he has quirk. So pretty much Deku, says, "Thank you, All Might," and pretty much All Might says, no problem, hero," and pretty much jumps off. Now Deku doesn't, ask All Might this question, the question in canon, because Deku already knows that he can be a great hero. He was told that from his young life. So Deku already has that confidence to become a hero. So pretty much Deku goes back home after that whole entire situation. Sorry guys, Deku goes back home after the whole entire situation, and we start the 10-month art training. Now Deku trains with Bakugo, taking out all the trash in Deku Beach and training and sparring in there. Since Deku was a very strong, Deku, was moving the trash out, and some of the trash, or a big pile of scrap fell on Deku. But Deku turned his skin into silver, and pretty much, the scrap metal busted off of Deku's skin. So Deku wasn't hurt. So Deku used it, and Deku also had increased strength, like Colossus type of strength. It pretty much picked up the rubble, or like the junk, and threw it, you know, and threw it away. Pretty much taking out half of the trash pretty fast. Now, pretty much through about 5 weeks, they get all the trash up and get Deku Beach pretty clean. Pretty much after that, they start sparring for the rest of the 10-month arc training, and Deku focuses on more of his swimming skill, his combat training, and also Deku trains on, trying to focus, his whole entire adaptation thing, but he never can because that's not, thing. So pretty much Deku, tests his limits. Pretty much, drowning himself, setting himself on fire, and pretty much surviving in all those things. Deku also, makes Bakugo throw an explosion at him, but Deku's adaptation or survival thing for Bakugo's explosions in turn Deku's skin into some sort of metal. Some sort of metal that's impervious to, kinetic energy or, explosions, kind of like how vibranium works. So Deku's skin can basically turn into vibranium when he fights Bakugo. That's the survival tactic for Bakugo's quirk. So pretty much Deku's skin turns into vibranium. Pretty much when Deku's get hit, where Deku's muscle fibers are, that's where, the purple energy glows. So yeah, so pretty much Deku is pretty strong. And Deku has the same bod that he had doing the 10-month archery when All Might trained him. So yeah, Deku's pretty strong. So pretty much after Deku, getting a pretty good training in, Deku goes to the entrance exams and splits up from Bakugo. Deku gets ready and pretty much they get started. They get ready and Deku starts sprinting past everybody, running up and down, the model city. Deku, jumps towards a robot and a robot punches Deku. Deku adapts into turning himself into the same middle as the robot, his skin into the same middle as the robot, and pretty much grabbing the robot and ripping him off. Okay, guys, just to emphasize, when I say skin, I mean his muscles, his bones, and his, skin. So pretty much Deku's whole entire body turns into that middle. So pretty much Deku, grabs the robot and starts throwing it around using the middle body that he has out of the robot's middle. Pretty much, crushing robots, punching them in the chest, and pretty much throwing them away. Now, Deku in his middle states, it's different forms of strength that he has. In his robot middle state, Deku does have, the same amount of strength that robots had. So pretty much a pretty good amount of strength, and you'll throw your average human or somebody across the room with little effort. Pretty much, Deku starts running around, taking out robots, getting a pretty good score altogether. Eventually, Deku gets to the Zero Point robot, and pretty much, is about to get stomped on by the Zero Point robot because he's trying to, save Ochaku. Deku gets smushed, but he turns into some sort of slime and, survives. Pretty much, Deku slimes towards, Ochaku, grabbing her out of the rubble and sliding her away. Deku, pits her down and says, "Are you okay?" And pretty much, slides back, into the model city, taking down more Zero-Point robots by going into their gears and, messing with their electricity and, shocking them in the inside. So Deku gets a pretty good score all along, automatically acing the test, and pretty much, getting a pretty good score altogether. Now, the next day, Deku gets a note from UA saying that he got in. Deku goes to UA the next day, and basically, goes into class 1A. Deku walks into class 1A with Bakugo and pretty much sits down. And Deku, and this time, guys, go in the comments and pick out a ship. Mostly, guys, if you don't pick out a ship, I'm probably gonna ship Deku with a certain person I want. But you guys can decide in the comments. And please, guys, I say this all the time. Guys, go in the comments more frequently, please. So, yeah, I love reading comments. So, yeah, guys. Most likely, if you comment on any of my videos, I'm gonna read it. So, yeah. So, basically, Deku is going to be, going in the class, pretty much having small conversations with, the kids in class. Trying to talk to Todoroki, but Todoroki just brushes Deku off. Deku's, kind of mad by this, about to, confront Todoroki. But Aizawa walks in class and explains to the class they're doing quirk assessments and they go outside. They go outside, and Deku's told to throw the ball first, because he got the highest score. Deku grabs the ball, and pretty much there's no survival thing in there. So pretty much Deku, pretty much stabs himself in the leg with a pin, and doesn't want in a vital organ. He pretty much stabs himself in like a very, bloody vein, or like a vein that holds a pretty big amount of blood in his leg. Pretty much his body adapts into making his body into, a superhuman form of his body, regenerating his leg, or like healing his leg. So pretty much Deku is regenerated, his superhuman, his superhuman, his superhuman, state to throw the ball pretty far as Bakugo did in canon. So for the long jump, Deku, for the long jump, pretty much grabs a bunch of sand off the bottom of the sand thing and pretty much, gulps it down his throat, choking himself. His body adapts and it turns him into some sort of water form, and pretty much he, splashes over the sand pit. The race, Deku, pretty much kicks his leg in, breaking it, and his leg regenerates, giving him enough speed to, pretty much get a pretty good score altogether, because his legs did become a lot more stronger when it was regenerated or healed. So for the grip test strength, Deku breaks some of his fingers by, stomping them, like putting his hand on the ground and then using his leg or his, foot to stomp on his fingers. His fingers, before they get stomped on, they turn into some sort of silver-like substance. And pretty much Deku, uses that to get a pretty good score in the grip test strength. So Deku altogether gets a pretty good score. Azawa notices that Deku's hurting himself to activate his quirk, and pretty much Azawa asks about his Deku's quirk. Deku says my quirk is adapting, and pretty much I can adapt to anything to survive. But I can control or turn it off. So yeah. So pretty much I had to put myself in a near death situation to activate my quirk. So pretty much Azawa says, a pretty strong quirk, but the limitation sucks. You might get an EUA kid, but it's a kind of a weird quirk. Pretty much Deku, gets a little bit angry because the doctors and everybody in his life said his quirk was incredibly strong, but Deku, is still Deku, so he doesn't get that angry. Pretty much Deku walks back home with Bakugo. Bakugo goes home, and Deku walks back home as well. Deku's walking back home, but Deku sees somebody getting mugged. Deku runs in there to try to stop him. The person mugging the girl pretty much has some sort of knife quirk that he can shoot out 6-foot knives out of his shoulders that are super sharp that he can control, like kind of like Magneto can control middle. Pretty much Deku says leave her alone, and pretty much the guy takes out his ejects middle swords from his shoulders, grabbing them, pretty much running towards Deku, trying to slice him up, while the other guy in there, is holding on the girl, mugging her, trying to get her, you know, pretty much they weren't only mugging her, if you know what I mean. That's disgusting, but yeah. So pretty much Deku, starts dodging the man's, cutting and slashing and all other stuff, and all other sorts of stuff. Deku eventually gets the upper hand and pretty much, punches him in the face. But Deku gets stabbed in the chest. But before Deku can get stabbed in the chest, or his skin can even be pierced, Deku's skin turns into, the same substance and the same metal as the sword, making the sword break off of Deku. Deku grabs the man by the head and pretty much slams him up against the concrete, alleyway wall, knocking him out. Pretty much the other man, holding down the girl, he throws the girl into the dumpster, trying to, slow her down so she doesn't run off. And pretty much the man has a fire quirk that can, he can set his fingers on fire and shoot, small fire blast. So pretty much he starts shooting fireballs at Deku, but Deku dodges and pretty much runs towards, the guy and grabs him, still in his middle form, and pretty much throws the man into the street, and accidentally he gets ran over by, a motorcycle. So pretty much Deku says, "Are you okay?" And pretty much the woman says, "Yes." Deku holds up the woman, and he finds out the woman was a girl. Now, guys, you can decide who the girl should be. Now, guys, see you guys later. Bye. Deuces. And as always, guys, have a blessed day.